what was going on inside yourself to try to wrestle with the intellectual problem that you were facing versus the undoubted emotional connection that you had and you have to have as a founder?
It's the single hardest thing to do as an individual. To be emotionally attached to something and yet take a dispassionate view to say that some things just need to be done. I can tell you that at least one of my co-founders was in tears.
When you laid it out there?
The first layoff. It's not like we've not done this before. We all have, it's a rite of passage once you get to this level in your career. But when you've built something brick by brick and to just go and pull the cord which sort of like brings the house down, yeah, that's very tough. That's very tough. And this was just the first layoff. And then there were many more episodes after that.
Hello, and welcome to the 60/40 podcast, the only podcast that deep dives Asia's tech and business headlines with the leaders actually driving the change. I'm here in studio today with my good friend, Nipun Mehra, and our other co-host, Peter Bithos, is about to join in a second. He's actually at the airport at Changi trying to catch a flight, but he really wanted to be here for you today, Nipun, so he is making this work. And he usually comes in with a poem, but we'll grant him with that. Today, we are going to mostly deep dive Nipun and Ula's roller coaster journey of the last few years, and he's going to be announcing something very exciting later on in the show. But before we get to that, I kind of wanted to just talk about what's happening in Indonesia's startup ecosystem because it's pretty crazy and it's pretty timely. And Nipun, obviously, you operated for many years within the ID startup ecosystem. So I think for viewers who don't know and listeners who don't know, there's been a series of arrests recently over the last few weeks. Who's been caught up has been the eFishery CEO and some other execs from eFishery, the Tanny Hub CEO, and then interestingly enough, MDI Ventures CEO Donald. And yeah, Nipun, opening thoughts on this one?
Oh, Maria, we could have started with something happier, but this is timely. I get it. Good to be here. Thanks for having me. I think it's the specific incidents you talked about probably are just an ecosystem going through a natural cycle. I am not privy to any of the details, so it's very hard for me to say what's right, what's wrong. And in fact, I even know some of the people. So sort of know in the ecosystem. So it's hard really in many ways to believe what one reads. But if something is off, then I think the law should take its course and whatever is the right outcome should be the right outcome, because if you take a long-term view of the ecosystem, then such incidents, they dent temporarily, but overall the ecosystem comes out stronger.
Yeah, as I was thinking about this, I was thinking about it along two lines, right? Which is, if there is legitimate fraud and embezzlement and things that are actually illegal, then sure, it makes sense for the rule of law to come in and ultimately probably, like you said, better in the long run because international investors would look at Indonesia and be like, okay, there's actually rule of law and like a judicial system to fall back on.
Correct.
Okay, well, it's obviously an evolving case, and so we'll just see what happens. Again, on the investor side, it's really like, did it cross the line illegally or was it just like a bad deal, right? Because investors are allowed to sign up for bad deals. It's not 100%. Great, but that's part of the process.
That is part of the job.
Yeah. Especially
in the startup ecosystem, we know that. In fact, the whole venture model is based on a few outlier successes.
Yeah.
Right. I remember having done some analysis many, many years ago, and the portfolios that we had looked at, 5 out of 50 companies gave 90% of the returns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? It's that skewed,
right?
The other companies tend to sort of wither away. They tend to either flatten out or some partial exit happens or some just burn all the money to the ground and then there's nothing left. So all sorts of flavors happen, but really the venture model is all about the power law and bad investments are par for the course.
Okay, so what's your ultimate take on the startup ecosystem's future in Indonesia? You positive? Are you optimistic?
100%.
Okay.
Because you did not qualify the time horizon.
Okay, how long?
So near term, for sure, I think we're seeing some serious headwinds, and I think that's also expected. If I look back at the Indian journey, which at least I was part of for a fair amount of time, there have been moments of lull and people questioning the ecosystem, skeptical of the ecosystem. There was a time when, there were even a company as large as Flipkart. I think it's all in the press and public information, and books have been written about it, about how they struggled with near-death experiences even at that scale, right? And by then there were very few exits, IPOs. It wasn't clear which way the Indian ecosystem was going to go. Right? But now when we look at it, we have a spate of IPOs. We have exits that have happened, including Flipkart, by the way, which was a monster exit. So the ecosystem is standing on its own feet. The ingredients are falling into place. Arguably the third most active ecosystem, probably after US and China. Can Indonesia follow that path?
Yeah.
Possibly. Likely. The market is there. The opportunity is there. And it has, from my experience of having built something there, it does have the talent to do it. The question will come down to the will.
Yeah.
Right? And the will of the individual founders, the will of the investors, and will of the government and the enablers.
So your timeline is 5 to 8, 10, 15
If you follow the
years?
Indian analogy, we're probably talking 10 years.
Okay. All right. And look who's on the screen. Peter Bithos. Your timing was impeccable.
Oh, it's fantastic. I missed the first 10 minutes. I'm already riveted.
All right. Peter, you're here just for the meat of it because we're about to deep dive Nipun's story. Okay. So for everybody, Nipun, if you don't know, has one of the most impressive resumes I've ever seen. Some would describe it as an Asian parent's wet dreams, aka that's what my parents would describe it as.
Is that right?
Okay, here, let me run through it.
That's pretty impressive.
Okay,
Nipun, right?
everybody just start writing, right? Taking notes.
Get all hot and bothered now.
Yeah. Stanford Masters in Computer Science, a Wharton MBA. He's worked at Amazon, BCG, Flipkart, Sequoia, and Pine Labs, all before founding ULA. Did I miss anything?
I think you got it.
Okay.
Oh my God. Do you have a cigarette? Oh my God, that is so good. Right?
Isn't that insane? It's like, your mom would always be like, I was speaking to an auntie and her son is at blah, blah, blah.
Exactly. I think the only thing my mother would have understood out of all that is Stanford, right? Maybe Wharton, right?
Good enough, right?
She went to Wharton
all
too.
All the rest is like, Pine Labs? Who's that? Is that... Are you working at a lumber yard?
Yeah.
Like, what are you?
Exactly.
Okay. And then ULA specifically, so this was founded in, I'm just going to go through all of the great, amazing things that Nipun did with ULA because we're actually here kind of to talk about what has happened since. So I apologize for shortening and giving everybody the Cliff Notes version of the good days.
For sure.
So ULA was founded in 2020. Your goal was to modernize Indonesia's warungs, or those mom and pop kiosks that are basically, like hundreds of thousands, millions across the country. You had an amazing fundraising track record. I think you raised over $141 million in less than 2 years from the likes of Sequoia, Lightspeed, Tiger, Prosus, Tencent, and then even Jeff Bezos' personal family office, if I'm not mistaken. And then you ultimately made a pretty painful decision to exit that business or to shut it down. So can you maybe take us through, from the highs of the fundraising days and then what started happening? What did you start seeing in the ecosystem and what ultimately led you to that decision?
For sure. Since we started with the highs, so let's spend some time over there because it was
Okay,
it was
trying to short you.
Exactly.
it was a lot of people's, a lot of hard work.
Yes.
And I remember I came to Indonesia in February 2019 actually. So it's been a while. And then I remember it was Chinese New Year holidays, and I just had one or two Wharton classmates who were in town and guided me, I guess, a little bit towards like what is Indonesia all about. And obviously I had seen Indonesia through the lens of the growth that Gojek and Tokopedia had experienced. And because I was at Sequoia Capital India, And we were investors in both these companies. I had a chance, or at least a bird's eye view, if not anything else, into the journey that Nadeem and company were all on, right? So it was very inspirational. Once I started hearing about the stories of the mom and pop stores, and it became very obvious that there were a lot of similarities in how the Indian market had also evolved, right? So both from a bottoms-up and emotional lens as well as a top-down lens, things seem to be making sense. So took this giant leap of faith and said, you know what, let's pack my bags, moved out of New Delhi, came to Singapore, and lo and behold, January 2020, we were live.
When you went through that process, I'm always curious just to seeing it through an Indian lens. Did you land in Indonesia for the first time and you start to get your head around it and you say, okay, well, it's not 1 billion people, but it's 260 million people. That'll do. Similar GDP per cap. And then I can imagine, coming from India, you go, wait, let me get this straight. It's just one language and it's just one banking. And I don't have all the dramas of all the circles and regions and states and all the. Was there an element of, right, this hasn't gotten to the India freneticism yet? It seems a little bit more straightforward. It's massive population, and this is kind of an untapped, no one knows about it. Was there a bit of that?
I don't think no one knew about it. I think that was that ship had sailed because, again, going back to the whole Gojek Tokopedia examples and Traveloka, not to forget, had already sort of broken through the pack.
It was
right?
up and coming.
Yeah. And they were sizable enough, right? But it did feel like specific opportunity around B2B. Because one very interesting thing that happens in Asian economies, it's true in India, it's true in Indonesia, is that the mom and pop stores, the warung in Indonesia, the kirana in India, are sort of community centers almost, right? There's social commerce happening right around those stores. So another way of reaching a particular segment of population that's not actively buying on Tokopedia or actively buying on Shopee, Lazada, whatever, is to go via the warungs, and you end up empowering, they're the little guys in the ecosystem. And there's something to be said for bringing technology and finding a way to make a real business out of that channel while also empowering the people who, sort of are bottom of the retail pyramid.
Yeah.
Right. So dual purpose, it all fell into place, and we decided to start. And then, like I said, January 2020 was our first order. I remember January 24th. And lo and behold, like I was saying, March 2020, COVID came, and the world changed, and that was our first pivot, which not many people know about because not many people knew Ula before, before the news broke. And our first attempt was to make a low commission, asset light marketplace type of model for things like apparel and long tail categories and whatnot. And we also started with a little bit of FMCG, but that was just part of the larger story. Then we realized a few things. When COVID hit, they shut the wholesale markets. Like Tanah Abang, this place in Jakarta, was completely shut down. And most of the customers who were serving neighborhoods for essential goods were crying for supplies because they didn't have access. Right? And in that moment there was an obvious need in the market. So we said, you know what? We're a small team. We can't be spending time with 5 different categories or whatever. There is a crisis in the world. Let's double down on FMCG. That's what we need. Right? And we did that. And what we did was how we went from an asset light model to realizing that you can't be asset light and relying on other people's inventory when the other people are not available.
Yeah.
Right? So you need your own stuff. And we need your own stuff means you need your own warehouse. But it's COVID. No one can travel. Some of us are stuck someone's in Singapore, someone's in Bangalore, someone's in Jakarta, but you have to open a warehouse in Malang. Okay? And how do you do that? How do you get your salespeople out on the street without putting their lives in danger? Right? How do you get people to use apps while there's nobody to go and teach them? Right? So there was a whole bunch of smaller challenges that we navigated through, but as a result of that, our sales took off because we were providing reliable delivery at a time when people needed it most. Right? So I think, and that sort of triggered the investor interest as well. And then the investor interest further fueled the growth. Also, we have to remember that we're talking about a time in 2020 where capital was a little more freely available than it is today.
Little more.
Just a little more. Right?
A lot more.
Yeah.
So, and it's not like the people who were investing aren't smart. They were very smart. But then there is the reality of what is the quote unquote risk-free rate in the world at the time. Today, it's like 4 or 5%. At that time, it was 0%. So the cost of capital and the ability for capital to take risks was higher. Indonesia, for many Americans, was considered as a high-risk geography. And when there is, and we'll come back to that point, when money is relatively cheap, risk appetite is higher. Risk geographies also receive capital, and that fuels an ecosystem. So we had a great run, and then somewhere around mid 22 to early 23. So those 6-7 months were a bit pivotal for us at Ookla.
Yeah. Obviously, the macro changed, the interest rates started changing. 2022, I don't know how y'all map it in your minds, but I remember Russia invaded Ukraine. That sent through the big first macro shock, and then the tech sector went down first, right? And I think that was when Meta and Google started doing these mass layoffs in late 2022. So, but at what stage was Ookla business in at that point? Did you feel like you had product market fit? Was revenue or were you still burning I'm sure you're still burning like crazy, but yeah.
So the way e-commerce works anywhere is that it's a scale business, which means that
you're building scale.
Yeah. And you unlock economics as you grow, right? The question really is that do you have enough money to become big enough where you can command the kind of margins that typical, like you'd want to be able to say, okay, you know what, I'm the biggest distributor in the country. I have access to the long tail of warungs that no other distributor has access to. What's that worth to you? Take your pick, Unilever, P&G, whatever, right? And so the other aspect of this is, unlike a B2C e-commerce like a Tokopedia or a Shopee or Flipkart, Amazon, the B2B business is very geography by geography business. You open one small area, you build critical mass so that your logistics and deliveries can be dense enough to make low-cost deliveries, right? And then you open another one. But if you open a lot together, then you're going through this deeper sort of burn cycle before things start to turn around. Doing. Which is all what we were doing at the time, right?
I'm curious, at the time, what was the perceived competitive advantage? So what's the advantage against the existing distribution network that already existed?
It's actually a great question, right? That was one of the things that we had to figure out quite early. The ability that one of the things that technology allowed us to do was that we could tap into the long tail of small retailers, which cannot be covered by a typical salesperson. So here's how it works on the ground, right? Imagine you're a salesperson, right? Your job is to go and sell X dollars or rupiah worth of goods. You can either do that by going to one big store and making a large sale, or you can go street by street, probably covering like 15, 20 stores at a time, and then hope to sell as much. I mean, any human being will just pick the large store. Right? The economics of going to small stores and selling small orders actually does not work out. But if you don't have a salesperson that is visiting every day to take orders, but rather there is a pull from the store, you eliminate that particular leg of the cost. There's still the other side, which is how do you deliver? For that, we came up with innovations like group pickup points. So a number of small batches of orders would get clubbed into one drop-off point, and the warung owners probably went a kilometer or two to pick that up, right? And that's when because you could batch all of those, the trucks were viable, right? So in many places, we were actually making money. This was not a universally negative operation. And the assumption was that as you keep scaling, more and more districts or sub-geographies will start to turn profitable, and over time, that's how you release free cash flow in the business. So I would say, in fact, speaking of free cash flow, financial metrics, the working capital, which is a very important part of a distributor's life, we had actually got some pretty solid results. I think at our best, we were at 3 or 4 days of working capital. And just to give you a benchmark, that most distributors carry somewhere between 30 to 45 days of inventory versus 3 days, right? So you can rotate the cash much faster.
Yeah.
It's a good thing in this business. But the other side of the equation again, which is can you scale enough to command better margins from suppliers? That is probably the place where the final leap was needed. And that leap would have needed more money.
Right. So then, okay, it's end of 2022. You see the macro and the fundraising environment changing. You're looking at your current business. So, I mean, tell us about like what decisions were you making at the time? Did you try, like what pivots did you make?
Those were the really hard moments. Okay. When you look back at any founder's life and the first realization comes that, okay, this isn't going to be smooth sailing. You must weather the storm. Yeah, that was very hard. Because we just had to make tough choices, especially around employees.
Yeah.
That bit still bothers me the most. But we made sure because fortunately, because we were well capitalized, we did the best we could to make sure that everyone got severance, healthy severance. And we had built a phenomenal team. That's probably one thing I should have mentioned at the start. If you think about some people in India, for example, right, in Bangalore, in the middle of COVID, they've never seen a warung in their life, right? And yet they were pouring their heart and soul into figuring out how do we get this working without actually ever visiting a customer. It's so hard, right? And so these are the people who to this day, I'm very grateful to for the work that we did.
Yeah.
And we solved some real problems along the way. How do you maintain attendance and discipline on the field? How do you optimize deliveries and so on? But then there was the times when we had to cut costs and we had to temper our ambitions. Right? We realized we couldn't grow as fast. We realized that we not only not grow as fast, we actually had to cut business in some places because we couldn't be running so many geographies, so many warehouses anymore.
Okay.
The idea there was not that we couldn't, we could. It is just about the financial judgment that one has to exercise to say, how much money do you have? How much money is going to be needed to the best estimate that one knows? And then you do the math and figure out whether that's a good thing to continue or not. Right? So some of the, quote unquote fringe areas, we had to, close. And when you shut things down, then obviously the employees in those situations were affected.
Yeah. So your first hard decision was tempering your business strategy, not so much like a product pivot, but just like how you're actually rolling out and trying to grow and scale. I actually remember at the time, I mean, we still have a layoff tracker, but you were one of the founders who made an earlier decision amongst the startups to take a relatively large layoff. At the time, did you feel like you were being brave? You were being responsible? This was the only choice? Were you worried about making the wrong choice and then actually the markets come back?
I guess that's probably where a little bit of experience shows.
Okay.
Every cycle that you've seen in the world before, we can, at least in my memory that I can go back to, is the 1999 boom and then the follow-on dips and then the 2008 and then, COVID happened and nothing turns overnight. Okay. Things fall overnight or seemingly overnight, but things don't recover that quickly. Then it takes a while for the dip to pass, and then over time, there may be secondary dips and there may be other things, and then finally the bull runs come back. So I was reasonably sure that it wasn't going to be an overnight
this wasn't like
return.
A 3-month thing. No. You just have to ride it out.
100% no.
You were like,
when you see Meta wipe out its market cap by that much, something big has happened.
Okay.
And we know that it big has happened because we went from 0% to 5% in risk-free rate. Okay, I don't know how many viewers understand the implication of that, right? Because you need to be a finance person to be able to appreciate the cascading effect of that. Because the if you can make 5% risk free,
Yeah.
right, you will not take.
Of course you would.
You will
Yeah.
not take big bets.
Yeah.
Right. You will not take big expensive returns because you don't. The risk reward equation no longer works. So again, those are things that we just sort of knew. The decision for the layoffs had to happen, but it wasn't just the layoffs, right? Because you have to also figure out the business strategy because the business strategy has to be tweaked. So we did end up with some very nice experiments that were scaling. The pay later platform that we had was actually doing pretty well. It was adding to the margins. We also initiated a data and marketing revenue line, I guess, which came at very high margins. But it wasn't enough to offset the losses. It might have been enough at some future date because that's what the models all suggested, but just not in the time horizon that we had. So if you made one assumption, okay, and this is a very, very critical assumption, that I have only X million dollars in my bank account and no new money is going to come, then the way you look at the world completely changes, right? And the moment I felt that door was shut is when I started to realize that this is going to be a tricky place to navigate out of. But still, we had to do everything that we could.
So first of all, Nipun, I'm really moved by your story, both personally, having gone through as a former founder, gone through this very similar thing, but also some of the intellectual questions that you have to ask yourself and divorce the emotion of it from the intellectual of it. And I see a lot of founders get wrapped up and mixed up between the two, and it's very, very difficult. Can you talk for a moment about what was going on inside yourself to try to wrestle with the intellectual problem that you were facing, the market, the fundraising environment, the business, what was working versus the undoubted emotional connection that you had and you have to have as a founder? How do you, in that moment, how do you separate the two?
It's the single hardest thing to do as an individual. To be emotionally attached to something and yet take a dispassionate view to say that some things just need to be done. I mean, I can tell you that at least one of my co-founders was in tears.
When you basically said, when you laid it out there?
The first layoff itself. I mean, of course, it's not like we've not done this before. We all have, it's a rite of passage once you get to this level in your career. But when you've built something brick by brick and to just go and pull the cord, which sort of like brings the house down, yeah, that's very tough. That's very tough. And this was just the first layoff. And then there were many more episodes after that.
Yeah. So just to ask, during those phases, one of the things I struggled with, and I've never had the opportunity to talk to another founder in a similar sort of situation. So for me, this is like psychotherapy. So one of the things I personally struggled with, and I wonder if you found it, is on the one hand, you're with whether it's trusted people on the board or a trusted investor, you're really wrestling with the existentiality of the business and knowing that it may end up in a bad place. But then I always got the sense as a founder, the other direction to employees or partners out in the field or whatever, you have to show 100% conviction until the day the lights go out. Otherwise, the whole thing is self-fulfilling prophecy. And then when the lights go out, you end up, a lot of people say, well, like someone resigns in a critical position and then you have to hire somebody because it's a critical position, but you're hiring them knowing that 12 months from now, maybe the lights go out, and then somebody calls you on that. I've wrestled with that to this day, but I always came back to the self-fulfilling prophecy challenge that, you have to run the business responsibly and you have to show conviction. Otherwise it becomes it all comes coming down while you're fighting for other things. So just, do you have any comments or similar journeys on that?
Oh, yeah. 100%. This is where the emotional side of being a founder is so tough, is that you're having one level of conversation at the board level, but you cannot transparently convey the same message to the troops on the ground. Very difficult. Very difficult. I can't lie either. So you have to find some subtle ways of messaging without actually messaging, and hold your nerve, right? It's very, very difficult because and these are they're employees who've signed up to be on your mission, right? They're here because they could choose from many other jobs, okay? And some of the people that were at ULA, in fact, I want sidebar, one social media handle that a lot of us follow for a lot of news, if you could call it that, in Indonesia, had a story saying that, hey, recruiters, go to ULA. They have the best people in the ecosystem. I took a screenshot of that. I think I still have it somewhere, because to hear something good coming from that handle about us was phenomenal, right? But these were people we built memories with, right? And so that of course becomes a real challenge for sure, 100%.
So y'all both basically had like cognitive dissonance, right? Between what you knew was kind of going on, but then also what you had to perform. You had to go out there and perform every day.
Yeah. But on my part, by the way, one thing that I did do was, before initiating any conversation with even my investors, I was pretty sure I needed to be sure. Okay. So as part of that, first we tried a bunch of different things. We even chopped off big parts of the business, became a smaller ship, and definitely that controlled a lot of the burn. But it's an inconsequential business. But is that what our venture investors have signed up for? Right? But then, okay, so we were trying that on the ground. Second line of figuring out was, I met other founders in B2B startups, the larger ones in India, in other parts of Southeast Asia, in Latin America, people who had started before me, many years before me, people who I think are smarter than me, people who have raised more money than me, right? And everybody had a similar story to tell, just that their funding environments and scale and geographies were different. And so there were slightly differing, in Africa, of course, there were slightly different narratives, but more or less everybody had a similar P&L. And I was like, if people who are smarter than me, raise more money than me, are in the same boat, then what gives me the confidence that I can do something different, right? So that was line number 2, right? Then the third one was meeting my investors one-on-one and getting their point of view. And there were some investors who had viewed, because if you think about how the investor's life is, they see many different businesses, right, of all shades, big, small, highly profitable, highly unprofitable, growing fast, not growing. They see all shades, right? So if you go to investors, you can get a very, very interesting bird's eye view of things, right? So that was the third thing. And I thought this would be a very difficult conversation with my investors, because, the way the investing world also works is that, we were a very famous local startup. In Southeast Asia, people called us category leader and whatnot. And people called us to their investor events and their LP events. I was on panels and whatnot.
No, you're the shiny one.
Well, anyway, so that... okay, thank you. But surprisingly for me, especially... a couple of folks actually got into the trenches with me. I specifically remember Ganesh from Kona, Adrian Lee from AC Ventures, Bejo from Lightspeed, the Tencent folks. I mean, the process guys. Actually, the list could go on. Other than a couple of folks who resisted initially, but eventually even they realized that the writing's on the wall. It was actually surprisingly smooth, of a decision.
Yeah.
I'm sure it was internally very difficult for the investors to go and explain to their partners what is going on. But what's right needs to be done. And I think they did a phenomenal job in managing it.
Peter, I mean, I know you have to go soon, but I want you to compare and contrast this with your experience at Hook and what is resonating here.
Yeah, so there's something you said earlier, Nipun, just for some of the founder listeners or tech listeners out there. And I see actually in today's current funding environment and kind of headwinds, a lot of founders that I meet around the area are struggling with this, which is you made a statement, which is shrinking to become an inconsequential business is not a destiny. And I found the same sort of experience. I had the same sort of experience and came to the same conclusion, right? Which is, you could come up with scenarios where the patient still has a heartbeat and lives on to fight another day. But to be honest, that's not why the investors got into it. That's not why you as a founder get into it. And I see in this environment so many people trying to pivot, trying to get to the next round, try to scrape $1 million together, try to get the cash burn down. And what's happening is what they set out to achieve is just gone, and they're just going on to keep on, right? So just to keep the patient alive. And what resonates with you try to make uncover all the possible avenues to fulfill a destiny of scale and purpose, because that's why you as a founder started Nipun, I imagine. And that's why your investors backed to have something of consequence in the ecosystem in Indonesia. And that steadfastness to say, I'm either going to build something of scale and I will try everything to do it, but shrinking to a small P&L for an inconsequential business just to keep the patient alive is not a strategy. And that's just not an option. And that resonated with me. And I find a lot of founders today struggling with that. And because they started themselves even before the first round, right? So, and they remember, whether they put their lives into it. So, and I'm like, your life and your journey is now more valuable than the thing you're trying to keep alive. And that's I think a good lesson that resonates with me, and it's a decision I had to face as well.
That's very well said, actually. Yeah. I don't know how other founders are thinking, but I think it's okay to have an open chat with your investors and say, look, this is the reality. We can figure out whether we do the inevitable today, tomorrow, but if it is inevitable, it's going to happen at some point. So why don't we just face the reality and move on? Now, here's the alternative view. Okay, there are enough and more stories of people pivoting into phenomenal success. Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. I mean, look at India, like Paytm. It's called 197. It used to be a
ringtone service. Right?
Yeah, it used to be a ringtone service, right? And look at what it is today. It's one of India's largest payments app, right? So it's not like it doesn't work. It's just, the odds are against you. And if capital has a choice, and for me, that was an important one, right? Like, you have to give capital the choice. It is not my money, right? And I have to remember that. It is... the investors quietly putting their reputations behind someone. Look, we didn't run out of money. We had more than $50 million, right? It's one thing to say the business is not working. It's another to say that, oh yeah, I'm going to give it all back, right? It's giving the capital the choice.
Yeah. So was there a last day for Ula? Like the day you ceased operations, if you will? And what was the team like at that point?
So the day we ceased operations actually was in late 2023. Mm-hmm. Okay. And it took about 6 months or so more to wind everything down. There's so many things.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, there's so many things. So many things. Yeah. And
it's not a pretty process.
Then we actually said, okay, we did take a license from our investors to say, you know what? Let's see if there are assets that we can buy, combine, and grow, which might make sense because we did have so much money.
Yeah.
Right? And in 2023, 24, money was a very scarce commodity. Right? So, and there were good companies that were available for much lower prices than they would have been.
I was going to say those investors that were holding on tight originally had kind of realized
Yes.
that. Yeah.
Yes. But you know what? It's very hard to manage so many interests, right? If if you think about the late stage investors and they have put in more money, but they own less in the company. You have early stage investors who have put less in the company, but they own more of the company. You have founders who have their own, they're sitting under a liquidation preference stack.
Yeah.
The whole thing gets somewhat complicated. And I'm sure there are ways in which you can rally I think we had about 14 institutional investors, but 10 main ones. Right? I'm sure there are ways to rally that many.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think as one of my investors described it was, why are we trying to push a rock up a hill?
As soon as you put my experience is, as soon as you put a business into reverse, all the alignment phrase and everybody's interests go in different direction. Partner/creditors become, where's my cash? Certain partners become, I want that one asset because I like that one asset and I want it, right? So everybody's interests start to fray, and it becomes a management of a herding cats, and it's not pleasant. It is a not pleasant experience to wind things down, and it is the thing that resonates is the time. Like, it took 4 months, 5 months from in my shoes, and even then, the long tail of the legal stuff took a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Did you give investors a choice to stay in and to go to the next chapter with you, or to return their some cash at that time?
So in the mechanics of how it usually works is that when you're unwinding a legal entity, the cash has to, like, in some ways, everything goes back, and then you can always raise again. So, but I did want to make one point before we moved on. I think you were talking about the last date of, but there was that last date, and then there was sometime about a year ago or so, where I think we also took a call to say that, okay, look, this M&A stuff, nicely tried, but it's not going to yield outcomes. And again, earlier on, I named a few investors who were really helpful in that part of the journey, and then there was a different lot who were really helpful in this part of the journey, right? Because it's just trying to understand what are the different options in front of us. How do you manage some of the constructs, the timing of it, the messaging of it, the confidentiality of it. It's really, really hard. And I am very grateful to a lot of those people who helped out. Right? I remember there was one time when I was sitting with Abik from Peak 15, and he was like, "We've been in this room one too many times, man." Mm-hmm. I was like, "Yep, I know. I want this as bad as you do." And it's just those little nuggets, right? Like both brainstorming and whiteboarding options and figuring stuff out. I think I was fortunate enough where most of my investors were very mature about the inevitability, understand that as a founder, it's the hardest for me. For the first time, I think I can disclose this because it's so far in the past now, that if you multiplied my ownership with the last round valuation, right, we were talking close to a paper money wealth of $100 million, right? And then you go and say, I'm going to pull that plug, right? No one takes it nicely. Yeah. It's so hard.
Yeah. And you can never, as a founder, if you're laying people off, you can never, ever talk about what you're going through because because you're telling someone they don't have a job and they have to start their own life over, their own work life over. And so you have to be the bigger person and shove everything inside. And that's a very difficult phase.
Yeah. And I'm really grateful to my co-founders as well.
Yeah.
Right. They, so obviously, for example, Alan was on tech and Derry was on the field and Ricky was doing operations and so on. But and the investor interfacing was mostly my job. But they were around for any brainstorming and emotional support and whatnot. So also grateful to them, and I think a couple of leaders who stayed on despite knowing what has happened and what was going to happen. In fact, a couple of them are choosing to still continue with us. So those are the things that make you look back and say like it's worth it.
Yeah.
Well, Nipun, I have a flight to catch. And I can't believe I have to sign off because I want to just say thank you so much for sharing. Brings back a lot of my own memories, but also more importantly, I don't think enough founders and people people in tech in this region hear about these types of stories. And just telling it, you are very brave and courageous. And I want to say thank you for your story.
Peter, you're going to miss the redemption arc. So
I know.
Thank you.
It's ridiculous.
That's next.
So,
Okay.
so bye.
Safe
Bye-bye.
flight. Okay, so Nipun, you obviously had a tough few years there. You shut down ULA in late 2023. You looked for the M&A. You went through the M&A route for 6 to 8 months there. Ultimately decided that wasn't going to work. But as we were talking about earlier, you are building something new right now. So do you want to give us a little preview about what you're building now?
Absolutely. I'm actually quite excited about it. From the time when I was at Stanford, I've had this one thing that I think the system, the technology and AI is super powerful. And finally, I feel like the commercial applications are ready. And it's something which I've been toying with, but I couldn't really talk about it because I was still going through the ULA motions. But finally, I'm at that place where I can talk about it. The new company is called NeoFlow.ai. Neo just for new and flow for workflows. So, because it's a human AI thing and I'm a big fan of the Matrix, I said, okay, Neo goes between the human and AI world, and I just loved the brand.
I was about to make a Matrix joke, but I didn't want to
It
throw
is
you
true.
off. Okay,
It's
good
true.
to
I
know.
love the movie. So anyway, so that's where Neo comes from. And of course, Flow is just workflows. And I feel like a lot of workflows in the way they've been done in the world without AI are going to change radically. And we're at the start of a mega cycle where for at least the next 2 decades, new and innovative things are going to keep coming. And I feel like, in a way, I've also reconnected with the younger me at Stanford to rekindle this interest at this point. But this time, of course, I'm a lot wiser than I was back then. And I feel like this could end up in a very interesting place. As things stand today, it's still super early. We are running a few controlled experiments, testing out a few workflows. We've partnered with a couple of people who are, it's still, again, with the caveat that it's super early and it's only a handful of pilots, but we're seeing results that go up to like 70-80% reduction of human effort. And the effort that remains is actually higher quality than what would have been had, if you imagine a whole bunch of people who are really just doing white collar grunt work.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm quite excited about what I'm seeing. I'm also happy that a lot of our investors have backed us again, right? And, there will be more formal, positioning, evolution, more future fundraisers, who knows what might come. But at least as I stand today, I'm really enjoying it. Like, it's that thrill again of waking up and going to work and finding something new, learning something new, and, make a difference again.
That's awesome. All right. So NeoFlow, you heard it here first on the 6040 podcast.
.ai.
Yeah,
by the
sorry,
way.
NeoFlow.
Because it's really
AI.
important because this neoflow.com is something else. But I
okay.
love the name so much, I just didn't want to change it.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, so NeoFlow, you're running experiments, of course, but the main idea is that you're working with back office functions and working to automate and like automate them with AI effectively.
Yes, because the most important thing, and one thing which doesn't get talked about enough, is AI has actually unlocked even traditional software. Because you can convert unstructured information into structured outputs, you can actually write code which can then take over from the AI. So in the three pieces to the puzzle, there are to the workflow puzzle, there's maybe there's four, so it's nice. Maybe I'm imagining my slide in the future. There's the AI, then there is the human, which we have plenty of in Southeast Asia and high qualified people. We have traditional software, which can take over and help with both the human and the AI unlock efficiencies. And finally, an orchestration to decide what task should be performed best by AI, what task is performed best by humans, what task is performed best by traditional software, which also, by the way, AI can help write.
Yeah.
So there is a company in the future which will basically do real-world problem solving using all four of these pods.
Awesome. It's so awesome to see you building again. I just feel like, your whole spirit is uplifted and happier. And
yeah, you can see I'm so much more excited talking about this. It's a different emotion from the first half.
We did start with the bad news, but I wanted to get through the bad news to get to the good news.
Thank you. Yes, it is good news. And, it's been a while since I've been this excited. So, yeah.
Yeah. And you're back in the full-on experimentation phase. It's like the early part where like every dream is possible, and you're just kind of...
Correct. Yeah. Which is also a little scary because I don't quite know where this is going to end up. Am I going to be still doing this back office? Is it going to move towards the front office? Is it going to be, where are the customers going to come from? Everything is being discovered right now. It's that 0 to 1 journey of, learning.
Awesome. Well, we can't wait to track your progress on this one. Anything else you want to share?
The difficult parts are par for the course. And you just have to find one way or another. Like my way was a very unique personal situation. The amount of money, the kind of investors, the business model, everything that people heard here may or may not apply to their business. But the one thing that does apply is just keep going.
Yeah.
Right? And with the caveat that there's a fine line between obsession in a good way and obsession in a not good way, I guess. It's there's hope, and then there is craziness, right?
Like ignoring reality, maybe.
Yeah, ignore reality, and that judgment only the founder knows. Nobody else knows.
All right, slightly personal question, but did you ever feel like, was it me? Could somebody else have done it better or like done it differently?
So that exactly is why I met all the other founders that I did. Because I was like...
You did market validation out there.
I was like, am I the only one?
Right.
And no, everybody was struggling. And many are still struggling because this is a problem that cannot be solved in a short time horizon. Yeah. This is a problem that requires many fundamental changes. And it will happen. Look, I'll give you a very interesting example, right? In the US, there was this company called Webvan in the heydays of e-commerce. Yeah. Okay, door-to-door grocery delivery, instant delivery or whatever, right? It did not work out, right? And a lot of people lost a lot of money, a lot of employees moved on and so on. But 20 years later, grocery delivery, yeah. I mean, I don't know how else to shop anymore.
Right.
Right? So there is a time to certain things. And, when the time comes and the right leaders emerge at the right time, they will probably solve this problem.
Yeah. Okay. So, it didn't work out. The M&A didn't work out. Then what happened?
Then what happened is that we had a board or investor meeting, and the decision was that we will find a way to unlock the company, basically, return capital. Mm-hmm. But I was also very clear that, I have a lot of unfinished business in my life. even if we were returning capital, I wanted to keep going, right? So in a way, some capital sort of went and came back.
Circular economy.
Yes, which is fine because, I really, really value those relationships. It's amazing that, they're willing to back me again.
Well, I mean, I think from the investor perspective, when you see someone at their worst, and you still ultimately respect who they are and what they're building and their drive, that makes you excited to go back in there for round 2.
I hope that's how they think.
I mean, they backed you again, right? Did it cross your mind to take a cushy corporate job? You must have been feeling so burnt out at this point from the founder lifestyle. Did you feel like you needed some time to process your PTSD, or you were just like right back at it?
I don't think anybody can be right back at it.
Okay.
You do need a little bit of time, but I did not get as much time as I would have liked because part of my conversations were to say that there is a next chapter that will be in my life. And,
you just knew that to be true.
I knew that to be true. If you look at my resume that we started with.
Stop bragging.
Is one very important thing. My career started with Amazon, okay, in 2004. 2004, Amazon was still recovering from the near bankruptcy that it had in 2001, right? Somewhere around that time. Mm-hmm. And oh my God, what a beautiful company it was to work at. I learned so much. And of course, it became a big thing. But it was a very fast-growing company. It wasn't a typical corporate. Let's keep BCG aside for a second, okay? Flipkart, very fast-growing company, many near-death experiences. Again, not a typical corporate, right? And as you follow that trend, I've never had a corporate cushy job in my life. I don't think I can. And maybe it's too late for that anyway. So, I mean, I did have a few VC friends ask me if I wanted to go back and be a VC.
Yeah.
Maybe someday I will, but it just felt like not now.
Okay, Nipun, thank you so much for obviously joining and sharing so openly. I think this was, as a friend kind of watching you from the sidelines over the last few years, I know it's been a super, super difficult road for you, but so happy to see where you've come out of this at, and excited to see where you're going to build next.
Thank you. And thanks for having me. It's always such a pleasure.
Definitely. Okay. Thank you all for tuning into the 6040 podcast. If you have any feedback or questions or want to nominate speakers, you can always drop us a note at 6040podcast@techinasia.com. See y'all.